Hey there, friends. David Lightbringer here in the Plankytown studios to talk about my uncle Lyonel Baratheon. That's not my uncle. I'm just excited there's somebody I can coherently cosplay. That's right, Uncle Lyonel Baratheon. I'll stop calling him that. He did steal the show. You know, I've had a profound thought, if anyone would care to listen. Thanks very much for clicking on the video, in which I will try very hard to give you a little different analysis than what else is out there, if only for sake of not being repetitive. Because you see, my friends, the Duncan Egg books and the new show based on them work so well because of the characters. And the characters work so well, I would say, because they are creative takes on classic archetypes. Beginning with Lord Lyonel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. So this video will be something of an archetypal analysis of Lord Lyonel, and later this week, if you like this one, I'll do another talking about some of the other characters. So archetypal analysis, so to speak, or if you prefer a modern YouTube title, you could just think of this as Why These Characters Are So Cool, Explained. In the first episode of Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, we saw obviously the horned god Bacchus archetype, but also the unlikely hero and the dragon slayer, the brothers fighting, the haughty and corrupt lecher, the Mr. Miyagi, if you will, and of course the culturally ubiquitous cosmic world tree. We even got that. These kinds of archetypal characters are immediately understood by the viewer on both a conscious and a subconscious level. And that's why their personalities can resonate with us so strongly with just a few well-placed, well-delivered lines given in the right context. The reason you should watch the rest of this video is because archetypes are fun to talk about, come on, and more importantly because drawing attention to them and thinking about them actively deepens and enhances our understanding of the story, and isn't that why you're here on YouTube? A Song of Ice and Fire archetypes are extra cool because there are two layers to them. So George, first of all, he makes his own archetype, such as the ultra-horny, ultra-stubborn Baratheon Stormlord. But of course, he's fashioning those not out of thin air, but rather from world mythology and folklore. And so in this case, the Baratheon Stormlord, so to speak, is really a combination of classic mythical storm god, Green Man, and Dragon Slayer. Then George will throw in a Monty Python joke about castles falling down over and over and sinking, and call it a day. So please make yourself welcome in our feast tent, log cabin type thing. And by all means, have yourself a bird so we can get to the dancing, you know? And if you didn't bring me a gift, that's okay. Just subscribe to the channel and leave a comment after watching. And if you want to join our very friendly and untoxic Discord community, then you can do that by becoming a YouTube channel member squisher with the join button below, or by joining our Patreon, which by the way, you can do for free. And either way, you will get a fresh Discord invite. So with all that said, let's talk about Lyonel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. All right, so obviously this is not a cloth of gold cape. It's just a jacket. Uncle Lyonel won't let you borrow the real cape, only the horned helm, and that's only if you drink enough horns of ale. That's how that works. In any case, before we get into any actual folklore, let's just take Lyonel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, as presented. His sobriquet, the Laughing Storm, is kind of an archetype on its own. So his mirth, enthusiasm, and revelry is like a storm. Sudden, unpredictable, forceful, and spinning in a circle. And we should assume, although we haven't seen it yet, that his wrath can potentially be fierce and terrible and violent like a storm. Daniel Ings, who plays Lyonel, talks about how he wants to elevate everything to the level of a furious storm. And you can see how his enthusiasm and personality essentially wants to sweep you up like a tempest. And yes, he did spin dunk like a hurricane, cyclone, or whirlpool. So as you will have noticed, Lyonel reminds us of other Baratheons, particularly Robert and Renly. However, in my opinion, Lyonel is the best Baratheon that we've seen on screen so far, and it's not close. His drunken revelry and good-natured hedonism is kind of what reminds us of Robert and Renly. So for example, Robert, when he first came to Winterfell at the beginning of Game of Thrones, what was he doing? He was raving about the bounty of the summer down in the south. The food, the weather, the girls. So it's basically all fertility, Summer King stuff. And then we have Renly, who married the Tyrells from the Reach, with the Tyrells bringing the bounty of the Reach to King's Landing. They brought all the food when everyone needed it. And Renly's knights from the Reach are called the Knights of Summer, because Renly also is playing the role of Summer King here. And then we have Lyonel with his awesome feast tent. Again, grab a turkey leg or an apple tart or whatever looks tasty. However, I do have to say that Lyonel seems a little sharper and more politically on top of his game, perhaps, than Robert or Renly, meaning that he's not somebody you could take advantage of. dwarf. We do see Lyonel sort of playing with a more realistically sized warhammer, including spearing a little potato or something with it. So that's obviously a nod to Robert and his unrealistically huge warhammer. And although Lyonel doesn't really remind us of Stannis, we did get that burn the heretic reference, which would seem like a nod to Stannis, at least for us fans. And then to the point of this video, Lyonel is really doing an unmistakable horned god, Lord of the Feast, Lord of the Dance kind of routine. I mean, have you seen these shots from the rest of the season trailer that played at the end of the episode? Because yeah, that's him. That's Dionysius, Pan, Bacchus. Think of any of those type of fellows. And as some of you in the chat pointed out, there does seem to be a little bit of a Greek, Romany, Balkan sort of feel to both Lyonel and the wild music and dancing, which I thought was pretty cool and fitting. And just like a Bacchus or a Pan or a Dionysius, Lyonel's hedonism, and he himself is jolly and fun and welcoming, but also wild and seductive and even dangerous. Why the f are you in my tent? Oh, I'm sorry. I invited you here and thanked you for coming. Sorry about that. I'll try to put the knife away. Or actually, we'll pick it back up because these horned gods are also associated with blood sacrifice. Sometimes their own sacrifice and sometimes you, the guest. Sorry to break the bad news. Gotta make the plants grow. And in Westeros, the plants do drink blood, so that is a thing. And also a thing, resurrection. The horn god, it's really all nature cycle stuff. Nature does come back after winter, so the horn god is resurrected, and so he is a kind of master of death and life. We'll get into this later, but essentially that's why Lyonel might kill Dunk, or he might welcome him in and flirt with him a bunch. You just never know. You just never know. And you can see George using this sort of death and resurrection, blood sacrifice, Carnuno stuff all over the place. You might remember the late Lord Renly, or King Renly. He was cut down in a tourney feast tent, much like Lord Lyonel's, except it was green, of course. And who is it with Renly Baratheon in the tent at that time? That's right, it's Dunk's descendant, Brienne of Tarth. She was right there with Renly, just as Dunk is with Lyonel in the tent. So, something, history, it's like a poem, it rhymes, archetypes, parallels, yada, yada, yada. And of course, Robert's death took place while he was on a hunt in the woods, and also right at the end of summer. So that's the death of the Summer King. You see how this works. Now, George did create his own horned fertility god. That's Garth the Green, as you will know. He is the folkloric hero of the Reach, and he's so popular in the Reach that the Faith of the Seven had to just sort of absorb him. And so the stained glass windows in the septs in the Reach feature Garth the Green right alongside the gods of the Faith of the Seven. Garth the Green is associated with fertility, both the fertility of all the maidens that he walks by and the fertility of the land. He's got an endless bag of seed, a sack of seed that he sows, if you will. And again, this is just classic horned god as an avatar of nature stuff. And along the same lines, Garth the Green also associated with blood sacrifice, sometimes his own, sometimes yours. But either way, this is done to make the seasons turn. That's flat out said right in the World of Ice and Fire. So yeah, Garth the Green, basically the Green Man. So you'll notice that even though the Baratheon colors are black and gold, George always conspires to put them in green. Again, Robert died in his hunting greens, and Renly turns all of his stag regalia green and gold after marrying Marjorie Tyrell because those are their house colors. So green and gold, the colors of the Summer King. Think green grass, the sun is shining, and we can't help but notice that Lyonel also wearing green and gold in the tent. So supposedly Garth the Green was the first king of the first men in Westeros. We don't know how true that is, it's 8,000-year-old folklore, but it probably just means that the green men were worshipped by the early first men, because Garth the Green is described exactly like a green man. Green skin, antlers like a stag, magic powers, they ride elks, they have green seer magic, they're associated with weirwoods, etc., etc. It's the same for the green men on the Isle of Faces and Garth the Green in the Reach. And of course, we saw a green man from the Isle of Faces on House of the Dragon Season 2 in the Harrenhal Godswood, because Harrenhal is on the shores of the God's Eye Lake, in which the Isle of Faces is located. So Garth the Green, or just the Green Men more generally, they had a very strong influence in the Reach, as we said, but it wasn't just confined to the Reach. They influenced all of First Man culture. That's why the Baratheons from the Stormlands wear antlers. The first Baratheon, Orys Baratheon, bastard half-brother of Aegon the Conqueror, he conquered House Durrandon and essentially adopted all of their symbolism, regalia, colors, slogan, basically their whole identity. And the ancient Durrandon, we read, were very close to the children of the forest. So presumably those first Durrandon kings are dressing up like green men to sort of convey on themselves the power and authority of the green men. Or perhaps the first Durrandon kings were green men or green men first man hybrids, and thus green seer kings, like Bran is going to be. Then as time goes on, it basically just becomes a tradition, again, to convey the power and authority of this legendary figure that's respected all through Westeros, deep in the subconscious. And so now the Baratheons prance about with giant antlers on their head, which, by the way, I highly recommend. At least one time in your life, you should try it. It's a lot of fun. You just gotta watch out for the chandeliers. Doorways, you just turn your head sideways. So when Lyonel stands up and has his profound thought and gives his little speech, which kind of went nowhere, to be honest, he was talking about the origins of jousting and tourneys from 4,000 years ago. Let me explain what I think he was talking about. So in George's world, the chivalric traditions of knighthood and tourney jousting originated in the Reach. That's where knighthood has the most social status and cultural importance. And the same goes for tourneys, which are judged the most stringently in the Reach. Now, the Maesters say that these knightly traditions came to Westeros with the Andals, which does make sense. The Andals were the first people that we know of to have steel plate, which is a large part of the knightly traditions. And the Andal faith of the Seven is essentially serving as a loose analog to medieval Christianity, and that is the cultural context in which the real chivalric knighthood traditions of medieval Europe arose. However, the Reach does have an older origin story for this stuff, and it has to do with Garth the Green, so long before the coming of the Andals, and the legend says that one of Garth's sons, John the Oak, sired by Garth the Green on a giantess, was in fact the first knight who brought chivalry to Westeros. John the Oak's descendants are the Oakhearts, so think of Sir Ares Oakhart, who was a knight of the Kingsguard, right up until he recklessly threw his life away charging into Areo Hota's long axe, so rest in peace. And overall, it's hard to know what to make of a legend about an 8-foot-tall John the Oak knight, the child of a green man and a giantess. So when Lyonel says our ancestors were here thousands of years ago inventing knights and tournaments and all that, but then also suggests that maybe it wasn't humans that came up with it, he could well be referring to these old legends from the Reach about John the Oak, and therefore kind of implying that the Green Men invented tourney jousting, which seems weird until you remember that the Green Men ride on stags, and stags basically like to joust with each other. So it's hard to know exactly. Lyonel was a little drunk and his story did sort of peter out, but they do seem to be doing a lot of Green Man stuff on the TV shows lately. Not just the Green Man we saw at Harrenhal in House of the Dragon Season 2, but you remember in House of the Dragon Season 1, they were all hunting the white stag in the Kingswood. And the white stag is a classic symbol of Cernunnos, who, to the best of our knowledge, seems to be the ancient Celtic horned fertility god. So, in other words, it seems like George is encouraging the shows to use green men a lot, and that could be because green men are going to have an important role to play in the final 2 books, which I do think that will happen. Bran supposedly is going to see the Isle of Faces, so. All right, it has gotten a little chilly here in Planky Town, but I did find this yellowish hoodie, so yeah, let's talk about how Lyonel is stubborn, like all the Baratheons and the Durrandons before him, because the Stormlord, part of the Baratheon Durrandon identity, as many people know, comes from the legendary Durran God's Grief. He's the founding hero in the Stormlands, and he's the one doing the Monty Python routine. The 4th castle burned down, fell over, and then sank into the swamp, but the 7th one stayed up. And of course, Durran God's Grief gives grief to the gods by defying the gods, and he does this in 2 ways. One, by stubbornly insisting to build his castle at Storm's End, even though obviously the Storms don't like it. And then 2, he stole and married the beautiful, fair daughter, Elenai, of the wind goddess and the sea god. And what's really cool is how George uses this legend to frame the archetype of Baratheon. It's not just that the Baratheons are similar to Durran God's Grief, it's the fact that George gives us this Durran God's Grief legend in Kat's inner monologue as she is going to try to mediate a dispute between Stannis and Renly Baratheon. A dispute where they are both too stubborn to see reason and can't work it out. So that tells you stubbornness is a big part of the Baratheon archetype. And along those lines, Lyonel, once he's had enough, horns of ale or whatever, he tells Dunk a story about sailing right into the teeth of a storm where he might die. Lyonel did this because, his ancestors did it, so he should be able to too, or maybe he has to prove himself. So Lyonel is quite determined and stubborn, and overall just really doesn't seem like a man to be refused, but he does seem like a man who may proposition you, so stay on the lookout and probably don't say no. Now, the Baratheon Stormlord, of course, is based on classic storm gods like Zeus, Thor, Marduk, and Indra. These storm gods are meant to embody the attributes of a storm, so they are swift and powerful and wrathful, unpredictable, sudden, violent. They're associated with horses because, you know, the thunder of the hooves, and because this is Proto-Indo-European business. And then, of course, hammers and lightning are the primary symbol of storm gods. So think of Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, which thunders but also shoots lightning. Storm gods are also associated with fertility because storms bring rain, and rain makes the plants grow. And strong warrior men sire strong sons, or something. This is all very compatible with Green Man legend because the horned god, although primarily he represents the virility and vitality of nature, he's also meant to embody the strength and virility and vitality of maleness, male virility. Yeah, he's very horny. That's the point. And so that's basically Robert. He's strong and wrathful and powerful, and he's just got lots of bastards everywhere. And then because George is a fiend for this stuff, he has Cersei say that she put horns on Robert by having Jaime's kids and passing them off as Robert's. So he's just very horny, very horned. Now, one thing about these classic storm gods is they always slay dragons. Thor slays Jormungandr, Zeus slays Typhon, a snake man monster, Marduk slays Tiamat, and Indra slays Varitra, who's actually a three-headed dragon. And so yes, Robert, he slays Rhaegar, the three-headed dragon, in the River Trident. And just as the Durrandon Stormlords originally became Stormlords by being stronger than the Storm God, we also have the Grey King over on the Iron Islands. This is the other coast of Westeros I'm pointing at. And the Grey King, he stole the fire of the Storm God and then slew the Sea Dragon. So George, very aware of the Storm God Dragon Slayer myth, which, by the way, is one of the most widespread and well-documented myth themes. It's called the Chaos Conf myth. And so yeah, Robert slaying Rhaegar, it's basically George's version of the Chaos Conf. And by the way, the dragon is always slain in order to create the world or create a new kingdom. And of course, Robert created his kingdom by slaying the dragons of House Targaryen. And the Targaryens, they basically serve the same folkloric role as the dragon living on a cave at the top of the mountain. So think about Smaug. And so yeah, we have the Targaryens living in the Red Keep on top of Aegon's high hill, with their dragons, when they had them, being kept on a different hill in King's Landing, the Hill of Rhaenys in the Dragon Pit. I just realized I forgot to light my candles after I took my break and put my hoodie on. We've got just enough candle left to finish this tiny last section of the video. And so this last bit is about the fact that the Horn God is a psychopomp figure. And a psychopomp is basically any mythical figure that mediates the transit between the realm of the dead and the realm of the living. Usually they are ushering the dying into the realm of the dead, but very occasionally it goes the other way and we've got some sort of resurrection or rebirth. I mentioned earlier, this is all about nature coming back after winter, so very often the Horn God himself is resurrected, and George is having a little poke at that with resurrected Renly. And of course, that's really just Garland Tyrell, Garland Tyrell, dressing up in Renly's green armor and passing himself off as resurrected Renly. But then, of course, there was also that whole song, Renly's Ride, that was sung at Marjorie and Joffrey's wedding, about how Renly bargained with the Lord of Death. You know, he begged a boon of him and returned to avenge his death against Stannis, and then he went back to the grave or whatever. We might also think of Cold Hands, and of course I did a big Cold Hands video, but he is a resurrected person. He's a zombie, and he's acting just like a green man, riding around an elk, guarding a forest full of weirwood trees. And you can see that he is performing a classic psychopomp role because he is guarding the literal door between the land of the living and the land of the dead. And that's the Black Gate at the Night Fort. On one hand, he's taking Sam and Gilly and Gilly's baby and ushering them back into the land of the living, but then also collecting Bran and his party and bringing them further into the land of the dead. So what does this all have to do with Lyonel? Well, again, he's sort of welcoming Dunk into this world that he doesn't belong to, almost like a sponsor. This is why Lyonel can interrogate Dunk and assess him and basically judge him and say, oh, maybe I should kill you or kick you out, or maybe I will welcome you in. And then there's that joke from the sex worker to Dunk about how he's a sad hedge knight, and hedge knights are sad because they don't even have a stag, meaning a silver stag, which is a valuable coin. But Dunk, the sad hedge knight without a stag who can't get into the tourney, well, he's welcomed by Lyonel the stag, who does usher Dunk into this world with a kind of ritual feast and dance. So it's almost like an initiation ceremony, and we can have no doubt that Dunk will eventually find a sponsor and get into the tourney. Now, Lyonel Baratheon, the Horned God, can't tell Dunk what to do because, I mean, he's already quite drunk. And more importantly, because Dunk himself has his own hero's journey to walk, and he's got to decide his own fate. But he did get a big power-up from Lyonel, who filled him with confidence. He told him, "The Seven have given you tallness, so be tall." And this turns out to be the inspiration for Dunk's claiming the title Sir Duncan the Tall. And then in the future preview of the, episodes to come, we saw that Lyonel wants Dunk to join his side in the tug of war, saying, "Will you heed my call to war?" So, yeah, he's doing psychopomp stuff. He's ushering Dunk into this world that, again, he doesn't belong to, and he has a right to do that because he is the Horned God. So thanks for watching. Look out for my video later this week on the brothers fighting and the World Tree and the Dragon Slayer and the Mr. Miyagi. There's a few. And do leave a comment and let me know what you think of Lyonel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm. And then, of course, I will see you every Sunday right after the episode ends with Estella Graves and Grey Waste Tim with a live post-game show from 3 people who don't have the screeners and are live reacting to the episode they just watched, just like you. So I will see you Sunday and also later this week. Cheers.